Hello, young readers. This is Asma Said, and welcome to a new literary lesson. Today, inshallah, we are studying a new story. Do you have a clue? Yes. The Telltale Heart is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. Alright, so from the story's title, what is the genre of the story? Is it romantic or it's horror? I guess that you know our theme. It's all about horror and suspense. So, what makes you suspicious? Has something or someone ever seemed dangerous or untrustworthy to you? The feeling you had was, yes, suspicion. While suspicion might come from misunderstanding, it can also be a warning that something is very wrong. In this story, you will meet a man whose own suspicions are his downfall. It's the same theme of Shakespeare. He has the melodramatic hero and with one downfall, and that's it. Now, today's writer is Edgar Allan Poe. Madness or melancholy. Poe got a job as a journalist to support himself and his young wife while he worked on stories and poems that would earn him the title Father of the Modern Mystery. A master of suspense. He wrote he wrote works that were often dark and full of horrifying images. Poems such as The Raven and the short stories such as The Pit and the Pendulum brought him fame but no fortune. Poverty intensified his despair when his wife Virginia fell ill and died. Deeply depressed, Poe died 2 years later after being found on the streets of Baltimore. Poe's obituary stated he was a man of astonishing skill, a dreamer who walked in madness or melancholy. Pretty sad. Okay, now for the story, let's go and play a short game. Okay, now let's go to our lines. And how can you tell that this story is told from the first person point of view? And how does the use of the first person narrator contribute to the development of suspense? I need you to grab your notebooks and try to narrow down all the elements of suspense that Edgar Allan Poe used in this text.
The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea.
True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad?
It seems the narrator is jumping in and responding to something that has been said to him prior to this first sentence.
Right, because he says true as if this is happening in the middle of a conversation and someone's just accused him of being mad, which, given the context, I think means crazy, right?
Yeah, and he's admitting to being dreadfully nervous, but he's also questioning why anyone would call him crazy.
And it's interesting to me, too, that Poe is using all this punctuation, so these exclamation points, italics, dashes. I kind of feel like that's indicating the narrator's emotional state. He sounds totally nervous or excited.
So the disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them.
And there are the dashes again, right?
Right. The dashes make me think the narrator is rushing, like his speech can't keep up with his thoughts.
But it could also be the opposite, right? I mean, the narrator's choosing his words very slowly and carefully. It's really an interesting use of punctuation. And what's this about a disease, right?
Yeah, I wonder what he's talking about there.
Maybe it's connected to why someone would say he's insane or unstable. Though he's not saying the disease has destroyed him, instead it's heightened him in some way.
That's true.
And then, above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad?
So he uses the fact that he has heard all things in heaven and hell to claim that he is sane, but hearing things in heaven and hell is not exactly normal.
Right, anything but normal. I mean, I have to say that if this is a narrator who's trying to convince us that he's stable, this train of thought is not helping his case. I mean, the guy's nuts, right?
Right, so let's read on. Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story.
So there's another dash and exclamation mark. He's saying how healthily, how calmly, and emphasizing not destroyed, not dulled. But he's totally proving the opposite. I mean, he sounds anything but calm.
He kind of sounds defensive. All this makes me wonder if we can really trust him as a narrator.
Right, me too. My guard is up. We should look for evidence of that as we hear the whole story unfold.
Alright, so mind the narrator here, okay? Is he trustworthy or not? Is he reliable or not? Okay, now when he says, I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth, okay, what kind of literary devices did Paul use here? Yes, hyperbole, that's exaggeration. And it's irrational, it's unreasonably true. Okay, so let's move on to read the rest of the sentence, to read the rest of the text to get more about the narrator.
It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever.
What? So he got mad because of the man defected eye? This is insane. I have taken the advice. I should be on guard here, because our narrator here is unreliable. Okay? Here use the first person point of view. The narrator, the voice telling the story, is a character in the story, remember? The narrator uses the first person pronouns my, me, and I. Pretty academic, right? So what is the indication of using the first person point of view? Yes, we have deep insight into the character, feeling, and thoughts. Here in this, the first person narrator makes the tone conversational. Remember the style? He's speaking to us when he said true, as if in the middle of the conversation. As if narrator is calmly telling why the idea of murder is appropriate. This leads to immediate tension for the reader. Someone who sits politely talking, why you're calling me mad? The disease only makes me perfect. Okay? It sharpened his senses. And he came up with the idea to get rid of the man, to get rid of the eye that bothers him. And can you imagine someone commits a murder because he gets irritated because of a defected eye? It's horrifying. Alright, so now let's move to some of the vocabulary mentioned. The word impossible in line 8 when he said, it is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. When I say it is impossible for dogs to talk, so impossible here means what? Not possible, of course. Okay, it means it can't be happen, it's undoable. Okay, so here, this part, yes, it means what? Not possible, of course. The synonym here is inconceivable. It means that you cannot imagine, you cannot think about it. It's unimaginative. The antonym, of course, conceivable. Let's put it in in other words or other sentences. Helen is a chatterbox. It is impossible to keep her quiet. Now, do you know what do I mean when you use the word in sentence or image? Here, chatterbox, that's an idiom. It's a slang, refers to that Helen is talkative. Okay, that's why I added the word impossible for her to be quiet. Okay, now, here our narrator cannot decide when exactly he got the idea of killing the old man. It was impossible for him to do so. Okay, it just crossed his mind. When I say conceive, that's a verb, it's an action. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Now, what led the narrator to conceive of the plan of killing the old man? Come on, remember. Yes, he wanted to kill him because of what? Yes, because of the eye. Here the narrator describes his thoughts about his relationship with the old man. He said that he didn't do him wrong. Okay, he didn't kill even the man because of the money or the gold or anything. It was the eye, in a very dreadful tune. So conceive here means think of an idea, to come up with an idea. Here, the old man's vulture eye made the narrator's blood run cold, and he wanted to be rid of the eye forever. Okay? Shocking, right? This is the very entering from the story. Let's move to lines 45 to 52 and identify details in the text that suggest that the narrator of the story is not reliable, and what it is about this narration that makes him seem unreliable. Okay, now it means that you need to mind the language as they did in the close reader. You need to mind the punctuation, like exclamation marks. You remember the dashes, we use it to add dramatic effects, and try to focus on his word choice. Now, we learn about his plan, that every night, for 7 nights, he has been walking up into the old man's room, opening small crack a narrow crack from his lantern. Okay, he tries to look at him to commit the crime, but he cannot do this because the man is asleep. Why? Yes, because the eye is the reason behind the motivation of the killing. Now, let's listen.
But I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. To suspect that every night just at 12 I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph, to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close-fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily.
This is creepy. The man is bragging with audacity of his cunning scheme. Okay, he's deceiving the old man, and he kept saying this repeatedly. Okay, he is truly untrustworthy. So back to the answer here. An unreliable narrator is a narrator whose assessment of events cannot be trusted for some reason. So here appears to be mentally unstable. The man brags with his plan. I felt the extent of my own powers, of my own sagacity. He reminds me of the beast. He's a psychopath. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. Come on, he is celebrating with success that he can deceive the old man. I fairly chuckled at the idea. Come on, do you remember the Manicala? He laughs. He finds this amusing, and it is disturbing indeed. So, let's go back. Every day for 7 nights, he comes into the old man's room, try to get a look into the man and try to commit his crime. He can't do it. Why? Yes, because the man was asleep and he could not see the eye. Because the eye is the motivation for his killing. It was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. So, what was that fixed the narrator? Simple, we said the eye. Why wasn't the narrator able to kill the man that he had planned to do? We have answered them already, and we know the answer. So the narrator here explains how quietly entered the old man's room each night for 7 days, but wasn't able to accomplish the task he had in mind. So vex here means to annoy someone, to irritate him. So the old man's evil eye is the main motivation for his murder that he tries to justify. He doesn't want to kill the old man. He wants to kill the eye. Creepy, right? Now we need to go back to before 27 to 44. Said that highlight the repetition of the word closed. Give example and discuss the idea that each example emphasize. Remember the repetition. Back to the task. Pause the video. Read the text again. Highlight all the repetitive words and try to find the indication of using repetition here. Remember, closed, cunningly, oh, so cunningly. Come on, here. Then the author used a very impressive technique. That's repetition. No, it is not dull here. It's creates some kind like he's narrating the events. He's trying to add dramatic flair to the story, to what is really happening here. And consequently, we as the reader feel what? Yes, you can anticipate that something dreadful is about to happen. This suspense. So, using repetition on these 2 pages is a technique that adds the suspense to this part of the story. Remember, repetition is a technique to add suspense. The use of the first person of the narration adds more subjective tone to the story because no one would claim that he was wrong. And that's why our narrator is unreliable. Let's move forward, okay, to lines 85. Okay, I prefer to read what happens after the man woke up and the narrator kept sitting in his room. He refers to the old man. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Okay, now he refers that the old man wakes up, tries to listen who is in the room. He cannot detect any sort of sounds. Now I have a question here. Why didn't the old man switch on light or light up a candle or call for the narrator himself? We said that previously the narrator lives with the old man. maybe his butler, maybe his cousin or old relative, maybe his son or grandson. Yes, this is creepy again. But he didn't call for help. And he even didn't try to switch on the light. Yes, the man predicted his own death. So he was not that cunning. The old man knew what was waiting for him for 7 long nights. Let's listen to narrator.
Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh no, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor." Or, "It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room.
Okay, wow, what dreadful image is presented here. Now he personifies the death as someone is coming, is approaching, is stalking, is watching in the black shadow. It means that he cannot be seen, and he tries to envelop the victim. He tries to take it away. And the only thing that the victim can feel is, yes, to feel the presence. He cannot see, he cannot hear death. And again, that's a metaphor. Our narrator is comparing himself to the death, which gives him a mighty power, that he can take the souls of an innocent person. It is dreadful. Again, it's in the hyperbole. The narrator has a very high regard for himself. Let's continue reading and mind the repetition.
When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye.
Okay, mind the word stealthily. Stealthy, the word choice here reveals or indicates what? Stealthy, that word contributes with what? With snakes, the movement snakes. Okay, they move secretly. And they are untraceable. They are undetectable. Again, this is horrifying. Now, let's move to the question. Let's remind of some of the vocabulary that will give a lot about the meaning. And you said, word choice. Unperceived. He talked about death and talked about himself as unperceived. It was the morphing influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither hear, so unperceived here means what? Not seen nor observed. The word parse on means not, again perceived means seen. So the synonym here, it's unseen, the antonym means seen. Now let's put it in a sentence. The ants were so small that they crept unperceived onto the counter. Again, the idea of unperceived is undetectable, okay, unobserved, unseen. That's death, and we cannot see death. So when he says, identify 4 places where Poe repeats a word or phrases, what idea does the repetition to feel emphasize? And what impact does the repetition of the word stealthily have? We have mentioned this, yes. We said that the repetition adds suspense. Okay? Adds suspense on a particular idea. So when he says in vain, to feel, little, stealthily, on these words. Although the old man could not see nor hear the narrator in the dark room, he could still sense that he was there. He can feel it. And that creates tension again by slowing the story's pace. I mean, that doesn't move very fast. He said, I kept waiting patiently at the very suspenseful moment, and emphasizes that the narrator is acting in a cautious, secretive way. Okay? I need you to keep this in mind. The word choice, the repetition of these specific words. Okay? In order to create suspense. Again, mind the style. So, when I say stifled, that's a verb. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. Oh here means pain. So, the sound. It is a suffocated sound. He cannot breathe up. That's why he couldn't call. He was panicking. So what sound the old man makes after the hour has passed, and what might have stifled his groan? Means smother. Smother means suffocate. On the 8th night, the old man sits up in the bed, listening for an hour after the narrator accidentally makes a noise that wakes him. When I say stifled groan, it means that's a slight groan. And why? Because he was afraid. He believed that there was someone in the room, and not just anyone. And he was afraid if he would make a sound, yes, secret person watching him would attack. That's why he was panicking. Don't make a sound. He opened a little crevice. That's a noun. Without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. The effect of the using the covering of the lantern by only a crevice means what? Yes, it's a very narrow crack. He's standing in the dark room. The narrator decides to let some light shine from his lantern. He is tired from waiting, not just patient. So here the lantern emits a very thin ray of light. The narrator focuses on the old man's vulture eye. Can you now visualize the image? Now, why did he focus that dim ray of light on the man's vulture eye? Yes, he needs motivation to kill the old man. When we move forward, let's focus on the examples that Poe creates suspense. Why do these phrases create suspense? Now let's go to the lines, read it carefully, and find those phrases. We talked about visualization and the strong images provided. Okay? And how do they create suspense? Mind the following.
One of the challenges in reading The Telltale Heart is just how strange and spooky it is. But if you carefully visualize the story, you'll have an easier time understanding it. Remember, visualizing is the process of turning the text into pictures in your mind. To create those pictures, combine descriptions in the text with your prior knowledge or what you already know about the world. For example, the narrator describes how he crept into the old man's room. He says, "Then I thrust in my head. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed." Poe provides lots of details to help you picture this scene. Now add your prior knowledge. Think about a time when you were sneaking around, like maybe at home at night. trying really hard not to wake anyone up. Can you remember how it felt and how you probably looked? Use that information to help you visualize this scene and to help you understand how slowly the man is moving. Later, the narrator describes how he opened a very, very little crevice in the lantern, or opened it just a bit, and a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. Use Poe's vivid descriptions to visualize this scene in your mind. Now add your prior knowledge. Maybe you've seen light coming through a crack in a door at night, or seen the narrow beam of a small flashlight in the dark. That prior knowledge can help you really picture this scene. But what if your prior knowledge isn't helping that much? For example, Poe talks about the old man's vulture eye, but maybe you've never seen a vulture or its eyes. In cases like that, you need to rely on detail. Poe describes it as a pale blue eye with a film over it. So when you read, remember to use your prior knowledge to visualize. But if it doesn't help, don't worry. Carefully look at the descriptions and details in the text. Those descriptions will help you see how Poe resolves this dark story and what his crazed narrator does next.
Alright, now let's mind the choice of words, the repetition, the details provided throughout this text.
And now have I not told you that what you mistake for me? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant I dragged him to the...
Dreadful, he's describing how he killed the man.
Gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed, stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night...
Now, he's trying to describe how he tried to cover up for his crime. Like, he took wise precaution here. He moved hastily means quickly, in silence, in the dead hour of the night. He dismembered the corpse. This is dreadful, okay? And he buried the man cleverly, cunningly, okay? Everything was done. He buried the man under the floor of his own bedroom. Suspenseful. Here the suspense is a sense of growing tension, fear, and excitement felt by the reader. It is created by describing characters and anxiety, and by using vivid language to tell about dramatic events. Now, we talked about, again, use of exclamation marks, use of dashes, use of the character's feeling, the main characters, and his anxiety. You know that something dreadful about to happen. Use the vivid language, the visualization that he tried to provide it with details. when he tried to compare death to someone who is approaching, is coming, is listening, is waiting, and the old man's heartbeat is increasing very high. Now, the narrator here says, "It increased my fury. I scarcely breathed. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. This excited me to uncontrollable terror." Now, the description of the narrator's anxiety heightens the reader's feel that he will go through with his plan to kill the old man. When you move forward, the narrator means by over acuteness of senses. Now, how the narrator's reaction to his ever acute perception increases the reader's fear and the anxiety in this part of the story. Take a moment or pause the video, come back. That's why this question is worth of 500 points. He said over acuteness. The prefix over, we studied prefixes before, means what? Above or beyond. And acuteness is the noun form of the adjective acute, which means sharp or keen. Now he can perceive things that no one else can. He said that the neighbors even heard the heartbeat of the dead old man. Okay? How can someone hear the heartbeat of someone's dead? The old man's beating heart infuriates the narrator. It is clear that he will harm the old man. When you move forward, what has happened in this part of the story? Yes, the narrator becomes increasingly agitated by the beating of the heartbeat. And the narrator is afraid of the neighbor will hear it too. So he kills the old man and pulls him out of bed, drags him to the floor, and then put his heavy body on top of it. Heavy bed on top of his body. Then he dismembered him and buried him under the floor. He said that no pulsation. We said that pulsation refers to the heartbeat. Okay? When I said I placed my hand upon the heart and felt that it there many minutes there was no pulsation, he was stone dead. And we said that doctors use a stethoscope to hear the pulsation of a patient's heart. So pulsation here refers to the heartbeat. Here, pulse, that's the main word. Ation, it refers, that's it's a noun. Beat, the antonym here is what? It's at rest. Or maybe that, in this case. Okay, here we can use it in other sentences. Okay, like what is the maximal pulsation or frequency that can be obtained? Again, pulsation here refers to the beat or the wavement. Cunningly. Cunningly. Okay, that's an adverb. Describes how did he commit his crime. When you say you're doing something wrong or something bad, you do it, yes, maliciously. This is a synonym. Okay, that's why I put the word and the synonym next to each other to be apparent to you all the time. When I say I then place the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. Come on, he's bragging with the cleverness of his plan. Okay? When I say cunningly means do something with great skill. Here, cunning, that's the adjective. Ly, that's the adverb when you add this suffix. Cunning means that we do something maliciously, okay? The antonym, of course, to be honest, to do it honestly. Let's mind the image here. He smiled cunningly, which revealed his malicious intentions. Do you remember a thief or a murderer who was about to commit a crime? Yes, he gave that dreadful smile. When you move forward, in this passage, how does the narrator try to convince readers that he is sane and reliable? And what effect do the narrator's explanation have on the reader? He said that unreliable narrator cannot be trusted, give an accurate statement of the events. We have established this already. When he says wise precaution, concealment of the body, it is evidence of his sanity. And far from convincing reader that he is sane, Narrator's comments suggest that he is unstable or mentally ill. A man who was trying to justify a murder. What rips the souls apart is murder. We are not authorized to take someone else's life. Okay, let's move forward. I don't want audacity. Let's move to the lines. 170, 178. Why is the description of lions in italic type? And does the narrator think of the sound? And what is likely the source of the sound? The neighbors heard the sound, so they called the police to examine what's really happened. Now, let's read the highlighted part and continue reading.
I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim.
Oh, again dreadful. Now notice here the italic words. We said, well, he has nothing to fear, so he's have the courage, but not that kind of courage. He has the audacity to demolish his crime and even to sit upon the dead body. Okay, now let's focus here. They kept talking and talking, okay, and he grew uncomfortable during the conversation. Why do you think it is?
Was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder, louder, louder! Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks here. Here, it is the beating of his hideous heart.
Okay, now he grew anxious. I guess that's poetic justice. He committed the crime cleverly, cunningly. He concealed the body. He dismembered it. Okay, and he had the audacity to sit on the very spot on the man's buried place. And then he kept hearing the heartbeat of a dead man, dissembled dead man. Okay, that's what? Sense of guilt, I guess. But he called it, that's mockery. Those people are hypocritical. Again, the character's anxiety and his feeling creates suspense. The repetition of certain words again creates suspense. Now, here he used the italic to emphasize on certain words. Now, he emphasized on being the old man's heart and the narrator's own heart. Yes, the sound was in his ears. It was his heart filled with anxiety. When he said, vehemently, I grasped for breath, and yet officers heard not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. Why the narrator starts speaking more vehemently? Yes, as the narrator talks with the police, he begins to hear a disturbing sound. Yes, he talked with intense emotion. And this sound gets louder. The narrator becomes more nervous. He tries to use his voice to mask the sound so the police wouldn't hear it. Amazing, right? Then he talked about the police officer derisions. They kept laughing and smiling. They couldn't hear the sound. But why the narrator interrupts the behavior of the police as derision? Yes. He says that though the noise of narrator hears sounds louder and louder to him, the police go on chatting and smile. They didn't notice it. So they're trying to what? To ridicule him, to make fun of him. And he thinks that they know what he has done, and they are ridiculing him through their calm, composed attitude and actions. Yes, they were tranquil, unlike the disturbed narrator. He says that those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. Why the narrator calls the police officers' smiles hypocritical? Yes, malicious. The narrator can no longer cannot handle the interaction with the police. He said that they are deceptive, they are false, and he cannot take it anymore. He prefers to confess rather than to tolerate the mockery of those men. Now, what does the narrator say that his disease has done to him? We're going back? Yes. Come on, the ones at the back. You didn't participate. Gather up. Let's have a quick round. Made him nervous, sharpened his senses, turned him into a murderer, or caused him to lie. Yes, he said that sharpened my senses. He can now hear the voices from heaven and earth. The narrator waits a week before killing the old man because the narrator says that he must see the old man's eye first. Likes frightening the old man many times, waits for the darkest night of the week, or feels guilty about taking a human life. Yes, he was waiting to see the eye. Can you evaluate the narrator's state of mind as unreliable when he explains he did not kill the old man for his money, describes his movement on the night of the murder, says he is sane, but then describes how cleverly he hid the body, confesses that he is nervous in the beginning of the story. Yes, he tries to convince that he's sane, and yet he justifies a murder. The author creates suspense by, yes, we have established this, revealing the way in which the narrator is kind to the old man, explaining why the narrator hid the body after the murder, or says that the narrator loved the old man, or describing what the narrator did before the murder. Yes, he said he moved cunningly, stealthily, very, very cautiously. Why is the narrator upset with the police at the end of the story? We have covered it already. The police find the old man's body. The police accuse him of murder. He thinks the police are making fun of him, or he thinks the police are trying to kill him. He said those hypocritical smiles, derision, they're trying to ridicule, to make fun of him, in order to convince him that they know what he had covered. Now, try to use details from the story to describe the appearance of the old man's eye and how it affects the narrator. Now, you need to pause this question or the video, go to the text, highlight the parts, take your own notes, and come back to check the answers. The narrator says the old man's eye is the eye of a vulture, pale blue eye with a film cover it. And he says when it falls on him, blood ran cold. That's the only way to rid myself. And he says of the eye forever was to kill the old man. Now, in what way does the narrator try to prove that he is seen? Cite textual evidence from this. It happened twice. Yes, he defends his sanity throughout the story when he says he's nervous but not mad, and when he is not insane but he sharpened his senses, and he said he explained how cleverly he planned for the murder, thereby proving his sanity, and he explains how carefully he disposes of the body after the murder. Okay, so when he talked about the acuteness of his senses, and when he talked about how did he plan for the murder and conceal it. Now, conceive, what does it mean? Do you remember contemplate? Contemplate is think of an idea. Conceive, think of it, tell about it, dream about it, or walk toward it. Yes, think of it. Vex, plan, weak, annoy, scream. He said it wasn't the old man, it was the eye that vexed me, annoyed me. What does stifle mean? Surprise, shout, frighten, or smother. Smother, not mother. Smother means suffocate. What does derision mean? Yes, as you can see in the picture. Ridicule, madness, murder, pain. Said that the laughters were derision. Yes, ridicule. Audacity means what? Scornful mockery, furious hostility, shameless daring, overwhelming terror. Yes, shameless daring. How could you do this? How could you? How would you brag of having this? This is the end of the story. Thank you for listening. If you need, or if you have a so strong heart, you can watch the film with depiction and with the actual narration, with that revealing the style and the tone of our narrator here on films or movies on YouTube. Choose the best that suits you. Thank you for listening again, and see you inshallah.